The foil packet slipped between his fingers like a secret. It wasn't hidden well, just lying in her purse, beside lipstick and a receipt from a place he'd never been. A single condom. Neat. Sealed. Waiting. For a moment, Mason only stared. The kitchen light flickered, and in that tremor of gold, the world grew painfully clear. He didn't feel rage. Rage would have been easy. What he felt was colder, like the precise silence before a storm. He set the packet on the table. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car alarm wailed and stopped. It was an ordinary evening, except for the fact that he no longer recognized the life around him. She was in the shower, humming, the same song she used to sing when they were happy. He used to love that sound. Now it scraped at his chest like sandpaper. He remembered how things had begun to change. The new perfume, the late messages, the excuses that didn't need words. A woman doesn't drift away overnight. She fades, piece by piece, until one day she forgets to lie convincingly. Mason picked up the foil again. His reflection warped in the shiny surface, a distorted man he didn't quite know. He opened the drawer, found the small bottle of chili extract he used for marinades, and smiled faintly. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was measured, controlled, the kind of smile a man wears when love turns into clarity. He took a thin needle, pierced the packet's edge, and released one burning drop inside. Then, with the back of a spoon warmed over the stove, he sealed the foil again. Perfect. Seamless. He placed it back in her purse exactly where it had been. The sound of water stopped. Her footsteps moved closer. Mason sat down, hands folded, face calm. When she entered the kitchen, he smiled as if nothing had changed. But something had, something she'd never feel until it was far too late. It began quietly, not with fights, not with shouting, just the slow, invisible drift that happens when two people stop reaching for each other. Lately, Emily's laughter had changed. It wasn't the soft, natural sound he'd known for years. Now it was sharper, rehearsed, like a line practiced for someone else. She started leaving the house earlier, coming back later. Deadlines, she said. Projects. Words so simple they didn't even sound like lies. That's what made them dangerous. Mason tried not to care. He wanted to believe this was just a phase. But then came the little things. A perfume he'd never smelled before. A second phone she claimed was for work calls. A new red dress he never saw her wear at home. He told himself not to look, not to search for proof, because proof would end everything, and some part of him still wanted to pretend. One evening, while she showered, her laughter echoed from the bathroom. Not for him, for someone on the other end of the phone. He heard the tone in her voice, playful, alive. It was the sound of a woman who belonged somewhere else. That night, he couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan whispered above him, slicing through the silence. His thoughts circled the same question, again and again. When did I lose her? By morning, something inside him had shifted. Not anger, not sorrow, just clarity. He started to see their life like a crime scene. Every detail a clue, every gesture a mark of guilt. And when, 2 days later, he saw that shiny foil packet inside her purse, he didn't flinch. It wasn't shock anymore. It was confirmation. He didn't confront her. He didn't ask questions, didn't raise his voice, didn't even hint that he knew. Instead, Mason did what he always did best. He observed. Emily thought his silence meant trust. But silence can be sharper than suspicion. It can cut deeper than any word. Every evening, she told new lies, stitched together with care. And every time she did, he listened with a faint nod, memorizing every pause, every misplaced detail. He noticed the rhythm of her late nights. Tuesdays, Fridays, always the same perfume, always the same tone when she said she'd be home late. He didn't follow her. He didn't need to. Her mistakes followed her home, in the way she avoided eye contact, in the faint trace of cologne that wasn't his. Mason began to plan. Not a messy, impulsive act, something clean, something poetic. He didn't want her to bleed. He wanted her to remember. He wanted a single, perfect moment where truth would burn brighter than her lies. That's when the idea came. It wasn't born out of cruelty. It was born out of symmetry. If she wanted to play with fire, he would give her fire. The chili extract sat quietly in the kitchen cabinet, forgotten beside the spices. A single drop could set skin ablaze. He didn't smile. He just breathed in, calm, slow, deliberate. The next day, when she went to shower, Mason opened her purse. The foil packet glinted like a confession. He held it between his fingers and whispered to himself, "Let's see how the truth feels." Mason waited. Not behind the door. Not in the shadows. He sat at the kitchen table, reading a magazine he didn't care about, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. Emily came home earlier than usual that day. She hummed softly, jingled her keys, dropped her bag on the counter. The apartment smelled of her perfume and rain-soaked streets. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. He already knew what she had in her bag. She moved with the ease of someone who thought no one was watching. She removed the small foil packet and set it on the counter, adjusting her lipstick in the mirror. Her movements were casual, too casual, if you asked him. Mason's fingers brushed the chili extract bottle hidden in the cabinet. He didn't reach for it yet. Not now. Patience, he reminded himself. Patience was the key. The plan was simple. Perfect. Untraceable. She would meet him, her lover. She would think it would be ordinary. Mundane even. And then, in the moment she least expected, fire would remind her of truth. He poured 2 drops of the extract into the foil packet, sealed it, replaced it exactly where it had been. Everything aligned. Not a single trace of suspicion. Mason didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He sat back, sipped his coffee, and let the quiet weight stretch around him. Every tick of the clock was a drumbeat of anticipation. Every distant car horn, a whisper of fate. He could hear Emily moving in the bedroom, humming a tune, preparing herself. Her laughter on the phone, light, flirtatious, told him she was blissfully unaware. And Mason, invisible and steady, was the calm center of this storm. No words, no confrontation, just observation. Soon, the moment would come. And when it did, truth would taste like fire. The doorbell rang. Mason's heart didn't skip a beat. He had anticipated this sound 1,000 times in his mind. Emily opened the door for him, her lover. Handsome, confident, unaware. Mason remained in the shadows of the living room, half hidden behind the doorway, coffee in hand, invisible yet fully present. The couple laughed softly as they stepped inside. Emily tossed her bag casually onto the couch, oblivious to the fate that awaited her in that very bag. Her lover leaned in for a kiss. Mason watched, calm, controlled, every instinct screaming patience. "Don't worry," she whispered, a sly smile on her lips. "I've got everything ready." The foil packet sat on the table, unassuming, innocuous, a tiny rectangle with a secret that would ignite the room. The lover picked it up, held it, paused, looking puzzled for a fraction of a second. And then, the moment, he opened it, and Mason could see the shock cross both their faces almost simultaneously. A split second of confusion. Then pain. The chili extract worked instantly. A flare of fire that shot through the air, unrelenting. Emily screamed, stumbling back, clutching her mouth. The lover yelped, dropping the foil as he fanned at his face and chest, eyes wide with disbelief. Mason didn't move, didn't intervene. He simply watched, a silent witness to the chaos he had orchestrated with calm precision. Relief, satisfaction, triumph. Emotions coursed through him quietly. Not gloating, not laughing, just fulfillment. Emily turned to him, her eyes wild, lips trembling. "What did you do?" she shouted, her voice cracking between fear and fury. Mason placed his coffee down slowly. He didn't speak. A small, controlled smile touched his lips. "Just added a little spice," he said. The words hung in the air, calm and cruel, like a storm contained in a single sentence. And for the first time in weeks, Mason felt the weight lift. The tension that had built in silence, the betrayal that had gnawed at him, the quiet anger, it all dissolved in that moment. He had won, not through violence, not through confrontation, but with subtle precision. The power of knowledge, patience, and the right touch of vengeance. And outside, the world continued, oblivious. Inside, a lesson had been burned into memory. The room was thick with heat, not just from the chili but from the tension that refused to settle. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, trembling, eyes wide, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Her lover fanned his face frantically, muttering curses between sharp breaths. Neither moved closer to her, nor to Mason, who remained in the shadows, calm, composed, like a man watching a storm pass. Mason's mind raced, but his body betrayed none of it. He felt the echo of betrayal, the sleepless nights, the whispered excuses, the subtle lies. all crystallized in this single moment. And yet, he felt no gloating, only quiet, unshakable satisfaction. Emily finally found her voice, shakier than she expected. What is this?" she stammered. "You know exactly what it is," Mason said softly. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The weight of truth did the work. Her lover scrambled to the door, muttering about leaving, apologizing. His confidence evaporated in seconds. Mason didn't follow. He let him go. The humiliation, Mason knew, would linger. Alone with Emily, the air was heavy. Her eyes searched his, looking for anger, for fury, for some emotional eruption she had once feared. But he was steady, unshaken, a controlled storm. I didn't know," she whispered. Not an excuse, not a plea, just a fragment of recognition, bitter and raw. Mason sat back, sipping the now cooling coffee. "I know," he said simply. The words were minimal, but they carried more weight than 1,000 confrontations. She understood then. The game had ended. The trust she had shattered was gone. Permanently. Not with yelling, not with tears, but with a lesson burned in fire. Mason felt a strange relief. The rage, the heartbreak, the restless nights, all of it had a closure now. Quiet, precise, unspoken. He didn't need revenge anymore. The moment had spoken for itself. For Emily, the consequences would linger far longer. For Mason, a calm victory settled in his chest. And outside, the city hummed on, unaware of the fire that had passed quietly behind one apartment door. The apartment was silent again, the only sound the faint ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the refrigerator. Mason leaned back in his chair, staring at the empty space where Emily had just been. The adrenaline that had coursed through him moments ago had drained, leaving a peculiar calm in its place. He thought about the foil packet, now discarded in the trash. A simple object, yet it had carried the weight of betrayal and revenge in equal measure. The act itself had been meticulous, calculated, but it was the aftermath, the lingering quiet, that felt like the true victory. No shouting, no confrontation, no breaking apart of the apartment in anger. Just the subtle, undeniable lesson, etched into memory. Mason felt a sense of clarity he hadn't known in months. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Everything was moving on. People laughing, cars passing, lives continuing. And yet, inside him, a small storm had settled. The betrayal still burned, but the rage had cooled into something sharper, something more controlled. Mason realized that this victory was unlike any other. There were no cheers, no applause, no validation from the world outside. It was private, intimate, personal. He didn't need recognition. He only needed the quiet knowledge that he had reclaimed a piece of his life that had been stolen. He picked up his phone but didn't call anyone. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered in the only way it could be. Silently, efficiently, permanently. For Emily, the consequences would echo. For Mason, the lesson had transformed him. He wasn't the man who had discovered the betrayal. He was the man who had endured it, acted with precision, and now watched as the world outside moved on, unaware of the storm that had passed behind the closed door. And for the first time in months, Mason allowed himself to breathe fully, to feel a small smile tug at the corner of his lips. Quiet victory. No celebration needed. Just the deep, enduring knowledge that he had the upper hand, and had known exactly what to do with it. The next evening, Mason waited, not hidden this time, but alert. He had cleaned the kitchen, poured a glass of wine, and settled in the living room. The city outside was alive with its usual noise, but inside, every tick of the clock felt amplified. Emily arrived later than usual, her expression calm, almost confident. She didn't know Mason had already been waiting or what awaited her. Behind her, the man she had been seeing slipped inside with a smirk, expecting an ordinary evening. Mason rose slowly from the couch. "You two look comfortable," he said, his voice steady, almost too calm. The man froze. Emily's face shifted from arrogance to confusion, then a flicker of panic. Mason didn't move closer. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make the air thick, charged. "Something's wrong," the man muttered, glancing at Emily. Emily's hand went to her bag instinctively. Mason caught the subtle movement. That's when she realized he had known all along. The man reached for the condom in the bag, unaware it was the very one Mason had tampered with. When he attempted to use it, the surprise hit instantly. A violent burning sensation, a harsh shock that left him swearing and stumbling backward. Emily screamed, but Mason stayed silent. The room was chaos, but he remained calm, almost detached, observing the collapse of deceit. The man fled, cursing, leaving Emily standing alone in shock. Mason finally spoke, low and controlled. "You wanted a secret life. Now you have a memory you won't forget." Emily's eyes filled with tears, not just of pain, but of fear, humiliation, and disbelief. Mason didn't gloat. He only let the silence linger, letting the lesson settle. For Mason, the tension, the anger, the plotting, all had reached their peak. The quiet revenge had transformed into visible reckoning. And as Emily realized the depth of what had happened, Mason felt a clarity he hadn't known before. Betrayal could destroy, but precision and patience could protect and vindicate. He poured another glass of wine, lifted it to no one in particular, and finally allowed himself a slow, satisfied smile. The reckoning was complete. The storm had passed, and he had stood firm, untouched by the chaos he had orchestrated. The morning after the chaos, Mason woke to the quiet hum of the apartment. No arguments, no frantic knocks, just the stillness that comes after a storm. Emily had packed a small bag. She left it by the door, a silent note beside it. I can't face this. I'm leaving." No excuses, no apologies, just a door closing on her choices. Mason didn't rush to stop her. He stood in the living room, coffee in hand, and watched her leave through the peephole. There was no triumphant shouting, no vindictive gloating, just the quiet, absolute satisfaction that justice had been served. The apartment, once tense with deception and betrayal, now felt calm, ordered, and safe. Mason poured himself another cup of coffee, sank into the couch, and exhaled. The weight of suspicion, anger, and plotting had lifted. He thought of every small detail: the foil, the chili extract, the precise timing. Every choice had led to this moment. Control regained, boundaries enforced, dignity intact. Outside, life continued, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded behind the closed door. Inside, Mason sat in silence, a quiet smile on his lips. He didn't need revenge to scream or make noise. Its satisfaction was subtle, personal, and complete. Emily was gone. Mason was alone. But finally, he was free, triumphant, and at peace with the reckoning he had orchestrated. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and late-night planning, a reminder that some battles are won not with anger, but with patience, precision, and the knowledge that justice, when calculated, tastes infinitely sweeter than chaos. Mason lifted his mug to the empty room. "Goodbye," he whispered, "and good riddance." And with that, the chapter and the story ended. The betrayer gone, the betrayed victorious, and the calm after the storm finally, truly his.